So I will present what we have done in the GRC, in the EU Soil Observatory, and a snapshot of the soil health dashboard. We're here, and Ian explained this morning, because we face some serious issues with soils, and soils are degraded, seriously degraded in European Union. And till 2020, not so much have been done in soils. I mean, the legislation was missing when, for air and water, we had relevant legislation. And in 2020, with the EU Green Deal, the picture completely changed. And completely changed because soils becomes a cross-cutting issue in many policies. You can see here that we have the proposal for the soil strategy, but also we have the zero pollution action plan, the circular economy, chemical strategy, biodiversity strategy, climate adaptation, farm to fork, common agricultural policy. But more important is the EU soil monitoring law. This proposal that 5th of July is from 5th of July is in the table, and now we are in the trialogue, and we hope that this proposal becomes a directive in a certain moment. So, in this we can see in this context, the European Commission decides to establish the European Soil Observatory in GRC in ISPRA with the objective to provide knowledge for policy at European scale. And we have five objectives: to do EU-wide soil monitoring, to monitor the policies that before some of them I showed, and to establish a stronger European soil data center. Of course, we are a research organization, and we want to continue to do research and innovation. And finally, to establish a EU stakeholder forum. I will go briefly to each of the objectives with more, and I will underline more how we have done the dashboard. So, how we monitor the soils in EU, similar to how the colleagues in Brazil have shown. We have a large sample survey, which is named Lucas, and the GRC manages the soil Lucas, which means that we manage the design, the measurement protocols, the selection of laboratory, the quality assessment, and then, of course, how the data coming from the field are modeled through machine learning processing in interesting maps. So practically, we manage the whole Lucas, which is the harmonized EU survey. We have currently 20,000 samples, but now we have upgraded to 42,000 observations. This has been repeated, it's important, it has been repeated 2009, 2015, 18, and 22. So we have four campaigns, which is important in order to see trends. And of course, we host the archive in GRC in ISPRA. And now we start having also collaboration with member states, countries, because some of the countries have also their own analysis. So based on Lucas, we go from monitoring, from having the samples to do monitoring chemical, physical, biological properties. And I give you a flavor of the properties that we monitor. So coarse fragments, particle size distribution, pH, organic carbon, carbonate, nitrogen, phosphorus, cation exchange capacity, electrical conductivity, heavy metals. But more and more new attributes are inserted, like pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, antibiotics, and a lot on soil biodiversity during the last years. Now we move to a new Lucas after 2024, which has to do with better integration with the monitoring programs from countries, new parameters, of course, depths, not only 0 to 20 centimeters, but going even lower, and of course harmonization between different laboratories, because the analysis of Lucas is done in one laboratory in order to avoid virus biases. I give you an example of an interesting research which was published now by our team in Global Change Biology. And with Lucas 2000, comparison of 2009 and 2018, in 10 years we managed to see how much carbon we lose in our agricultural soils. And we lose 0.75%. It's not so much, but it is a loss, unfortunately. And this has been done through, of course, quality assessment of the same points that have been sampled in 2009, 2018, and then applying a machine learning model. The second objective of the EU Soil Observatory has to do with the European Soil Data Center. We operate this data center since 2012. We started with some data sets, 10 data sets in the beginning, but now we have grown quite a lot in the last 10 years, and we are, as European Soil Data Center, in the core of policies, because we provide evidence with our data sets, and those data sets are free of charge, of course. Every user can download them and use, And we have an increase, an order of magnitude in data end users. Just to give you an example, in 23 we have published all these nice data sets on zinc, on cover crops, on DNA, on carbon, etc. So currently you can find a data center around 108 blocks of data, not data sets, but blocks of data, distributed either as soil point data like the Lucas, or physical properties, chemical properties, soil functions, and soil threats. But this European Soil Data Center is going to be upgraded after 24 because we are going to accommodate data coming from member states. I mean, EU before presented the law. If the law comes, if the law is approved, then we'll have to host data that will come from member states, from countries. And of course, an important issue has to do also with outcomes of the soil mission. I'll come back to this because this is the largest EU research framework that will currently runs more than 50 projects. We hope 100 projects, research projects, and we hope that the outputs of those projects will be hosted in the European Soil Data Center. Now, to the point of the dashboard and how we assess the policy impact, how we assess. We have seen a very nice presentation before by your colleague here, how we assess soil health in Brazil. And okay, we have a different approach per European scale, of course. Here we change scale, we speak about the whole Europe. And by assessing the current knowledge of soils in EU, we have found that 61.5% of EU soils are not in healthy condition. This is shown in this dashboard that we have established in the GRCs, a dynamic tool that shows in specific place which are the main degradation processes and of course the percentage of soil per country or per region that is not in healthy condition. And how this is done? This is done by the latest state of the art of the indicators that we know now. Of course, we don't know everything. Ion explained very well this morning that, okay, we have knowledge gaps. We hope that in the next years we will manage some of the knowledge gaps. But for certain processes, we know very well. For example, soil erosion, we know water erosion, wind erosion, harvest erosion, tillage erosion, post-fire recovery. On soil pollution, there was a colleague from Argentina before making the question to Ion. I can say that we don't know so much on contaminated sites, but we know a lot on diffuse pollution because with Lucas, we have assessed, for example, copper, mercury, zinc, and yesterday was published as well the cadmium. On soil nutrients, the nitrogen soil plus, the phosphorus deficiency and phosphorus excess, of course, the loss of soil organic carbon, the loss of biodiversity. On biodiversity, we don't have so much. We don't know so much because we lack a little bit scientific knowledge there. And how we measure soil biodiversity by potential threats to biological functions. It's a proxy, but we hope in the next years we'll be able to do such much better assessments. On compaction, on salinization, on loss of organic in peatlands, and in soil consumption, which has to do with soil sealing. And how this is done? This is done, I give you an example here. It's known for some indicators we have a threshold under with or over with the soil can be considered healthy or unhealthy. So in a certain, according to the literature, this takes place. And for each of those, of those soil threats, we try to identify which is the threshold and where the place where are the places where unhealthy soil takes place. For example, for soil erosion, we know that according to the literature, the threshold of soil formation is 2 tons per hectare per year. If you have erosion more than this amount, of course, your soil is not going to be equally productive. For copper here, it depends if it's a deficiency or it's a surplus. So we have such kind of indicators and thresholds. And the dashboard has 2 more characteristics: a convergence of evidence, which means that you go in a specific place and you see what is red or what's green or what can be in between, a kind of color system, and a dependency of process, because sometimes you may have one process or one indicator, but this affects somehow the other. So we know that some of the indicators or some of the processes are interlinked, like soil erosion and compaction, or some of the contamination process. So if you have copper, you may have also issues with other contaminants. So this is more or less the dashboard that monitors currently the soils in EU. We know that it's far from being perfect, but we're working on this and we are going to establish new indicators and to enrich more. So GRC's work as well is a part of the Horizon Soil Mission in Europe, which is the major now funding mechanism for research. And in this soil mission, which is a soil mission, the GRC plays an important role, specifically in the objective 3, in the soil monitoring, where we have to harmonize indicators, and of course, to come with a proposal for indicators that we can monitor health, soil health. But we are also involved in the other objectives which have to do with the research and innovation program, with the establishment of the 100 living labs and lighthouses, and of course with soil literacy. I go a little bit fast here on the research because we are also doing quite a lot of research, and we steer also the research agenda of the soil mission. So we're involved in the calls for proposals for the research in EU, and we are involved because we want that those calls somehow are aligned with the policy priorities. And of course, we support the implementation of the soil mission. We have to provide with our technical knowledge novel approaches for soil monitoring, new methods for data acquisition, Copernicus, remote sensing, etc., new metrics for measuring indicators. And we see the EU Soil Observatory at the data center as a beneficiary. I mean, now 50 projects are running, but we hope that after having 100 projects running, all the outputs of the projects, all the data center will produce with taxpayers' money, at a certain point will be publicly available to the European Soil Data Center. And we're a research group, 10 people, not so big, and we produce also quite an interesting research, more than 40 publications in our group in 2022. And I give you a flavor of the research that we do. So some novel assessments on soil biodiversity. One aspect in the soil, in the local soil, was to analyze DNA by Lucas. So for 1,000 samples, we analyzed the DNA, and with very interesting research, we understood some controversial, we can say, interesting messages. So the diversity increases with land use intensification, which means in the agricultural soils you have higher diversity. Increasing pathogens in agricultural soils, strong effect of soil properties on biodiversity, and pH is the strongest driver, but also climate and land cover are very important. Those interesting findings have been published in Nature Communication and Global Change Biology, quite interesting work. But also some other work also in Nature Geoscience, which has to do with different climate sensitivity of particulate and mineral-associated soil organic carbon. We speak about the research that has taken place the last year. And my passion, which is in the middle, which has to do with soil erosion. So we estimate not only erosion by water, but also wind erosion, tillage erosion, and erosion by crop harvesting. And we sum all this process in order to have a sum of the soil loss due to erosion in general. And at the end, on the right side, we did an estimation on phosphorus budget. We have seen this morning in the first part some interesting presentations about nutrients. And nutrients is an important stuff in the farm to fork strategy. And we are called to provide updated budgets on phosphorus, because the farm to fork has as an objective to reduce nutrient inputs without losing agricultural productivity. So something interesting, because we don't do only research for the EU, but also we have done quite outside the EU. So in July, we have published the Soil Atlas of Asia, but in 2018, we have published also the Atlas of Latin America, also in Brazilian and Portuguese language. And we have also done some work globally on soil erosion on different processes as well. So I go to the final objectives of the EU Soil Observatory, which has to do with stakeholders. We have a lot of interactions with stakeholders. Stakeholders means local authorities, policymakers in regional scale, in European Commission scale, in governments, farmers, researchers. So how we do this interaction? We do this interaction through a stakeholder forum. Every year we meet online. So this year, the third EUSO stakeholder forum took place online, 700 participants, 6 presentations. And then we move to Madrid. Spain had the presidency this year, and physical presence there, more than 100 participants and 600 people again online, an hybrid event. And we discuss what is the current status, and all this is happening through 6 working groups that we have established on soil pollution, monitoring, data sharing, erosion, biodiversity, and carbon. And of course, we have started having a lot of interaction with the mission projects. So I told you that more than 50 projects currently are funded by the soil mission, and we start having a lot of interaction with those colleagues and researchers. So in a nutshell, this is the framework of soil protection in EU. And Ian this morning described very well the policy framework, which comes with the EU soil strategy and the soil monitoring law. On the right side, the EU Soil Observatory has to play the role of knowledge management, policy support to various to various policies with science evidence, and of course soil monitoring with data and legacy repository. And finally, the third part of this puzzle is the mission, which is the mechanism to provide for research and innovation in the EU. The mission is quite, has a huge budget of almost 1 billion for the 7 years time, and I think it's an important role. Thank you very much. I will not be able to take questions because I have a plenty of hour and a half. You have my email here. Please feel free to drop me an email and I will be happy to respond. Thank you very much.